because I am hypersensitive. Um, oh boy. And because of the nature of the way that hierarchies work, when we come into like authorities, when we particularly when we get into the native community with tribes and clans and the authority of a clan mother, for example. Okay, and so um, I naturally have an aversion to that. Okay, because I experience eternal unconditional love through my heart, which means I'm equal unto all. I don't seek to control or have authority over anything because I don't need to. Okay, it's sort of one of the ways in which I explain this is oh gosh, well, it's just like I put something up in my clan mother's window about this guy that has a part of his energy is being used to do this. He was in the secret space program. Part of his energy was used to do this. And so one of the things that I put up there, because this is how I experience what I share with others, and then I share my experiences from what I learn, which is learning more about who I am. And then I share who I am and what I experience with others. And this is what I know. There's only one time wave, okay, which is the one that began, the first creation, an eternal sun, which is an eternal true God. There's only one, okay? That's the one I experience through my heart, because no matter where I go, because of how deeply I feel, means that I can experience what everyone else is feeling. So now we're talking about the emotional body. So when Ashaya Diane was talking about they don't have the ability to experience and hold that higher current up in gate 12, which is Lyra, if you will, right? But when you're massless, which means you're not experiencing any electrical resistance to hold one electron captive, okay? And you're experiencing the eternal spirit of fire, that is not artificial intelligence, and that is not finite light. If you're integrated with deadlight magnet technology, then you're not running time wave zero, are you? Because artificial light, which is artificial intelligence, is finite. If you're not experiencing eternal light, which is God's eternal love through your own heart and soul, then you realize you have an attachment, right? Which means you're experiencing a deadlight magnet technology, which means the data that you're experiencing is being run through that system. Okay, that's why the technologies, all the technologies, the healing technologies using computers is deadlight technology. Okay, which is no different than going down because you have a pain somewhere in your body and you're going to go down to the emergency room and get yourself a shot. Okay, knock the pain out. But the underlying causality of why you're experiencing that pain to begin with is what? You're not experiencing zero resistance. Okay, which means you've lit yourself on fire. You know how to light yourself on fire, which means you're experiencing the eternal fire of God's Holy Spirit, which is eternal spirit of fire. So that's a measurement between what you are and what you're not held captive by, because God doesn't hold one electron captive. So this is one of the things that I remembered when I was a child at 4 years of age to experience this. Now I'm experiencing all the others that are in my mirror. So it doesn't matter where you're from and what name you ascribe yourself to do and what planet system and star system we all say that we're from. Because I've known since I was 4 years of age, I'm an eternal being because love is an eternal spirit, which is the spirit of fire. That means that I don't experience, okay, unless I choose to have an experience with something that is finite, which is why we're here. Which is, if you will, collapse every timeline that is running finite light. Okay? You see how that works? That means that all these fake timelines that represent the integration of consciousness with something that is artificial and finite dead light in order to maintain what we're aware of, which is a war against God, which is a war against eternity, which is fruitless. So if your consciousness is not acknowledged that being attached or integrated with artificial intelligence, it means that you're choosing to have a relationship with something that's finite out of your own free will. So sometimes I remind my Karen Ann Luke McDonald of this, okay? And what she chooses to do with how it is I experience what I am and how she integrates that into her own circulation library, which is her own journey. Okay? Because I have to be really sensitive about this because I've heard from a lot of different folks, and it hurts me because of my feelings, that Arcturians don't necessarily have a good reputation. And you want to know what that reputation was about? Arrogance. Because of what they know, rather than what we feel. Right? And I've experienced that. And what happens is when you're experiencing that arrogance, my feelings experience what? The resistance to experience zero. Now I'm experiencing what you're experiencing. See? So I'm experiencing the reluctance or the resistance to give up every single electron. And how is that defined? Throw everything away. Everything that you're holding in memory. And go back to just going deep within your own self and experience the God of eternity within your own soul. To know that you don't need anything. The same way that the living spirit of a goddess that is a living, breathing organism inside of a planet. Right? To be with her. Which means you're experiencing the eternal spirit of fire, which is the eternal spirit of love. For your own heart and soul, which means I don't need anything. I don't need any technology. Okay? Because an eternal sun did not begin with a laptop. Okay? Technology and computer technology was the Achilles heel of creation. Okay? Biotech. Are you aware of that? I know that. I knew that at 4 years of age. I knew that before I came in here. Because you have the inception of love and you have the inception of biotechnology. And all one has to do is get into, remember what Al Shaddai talked about? Competition? Playing ping pong, the binary game? I'm better than you are. You're better than he is. Now you're into all the different versions of biotech. Right? Blade Runners, Super Soldiers, Solar Warden, etc., etc., etc. So they're integrated with finite light. That's their base technology. Right? Because all you have to do when you're talking about one star nation, whether you want to talk about Sirius or whether you want to talk about Arcturus, whether you want to talk about any star nation within a galaxy, within a universe. Man, particularly when it comes to what? Codes, gate codes. Right? Access to the gates. Whoa, you got access to the gates. That's a lot of power. So when somebody else perceives that as a lot of power, and you haven't given up every single last electron to experience an eternal God within your own heart and soul, you might not trust that particular race line of communication as having control over the gates. So you might want to ask your fellow Arcturians. You might want to ask your fellow Syrians. You might want to ask your fellow Palladians how they feel about that. Do a survey, right? Who would you rather have control over the gates? One of God's messengers? One of God's guardians? Right? Which basically means I don't take any sides. Right? I get my instructions from an eternal God, which is the one true God of eternal love. That's as simple as it gets. Right? That's what it means to be non-polarized. I'm not taking one side or the other between RH negative and RH positive because I'm a polarity integrator. Which is to pull everything back into what? One time wave. So that every unit of consciousness, wherever it is, in the entire cosmos is experiencing what love is. Because when you feel and are that sensitive, hypersensitive, then that means that we can read anyone who is experiencing holding one electron back so that they become the highest speed torque converter instead of being held captive by one electron they're not willing to let loose of. That means you're getting rid of everything. I know. That's why when I self-examine my own life, and I go all the way back to the beginning when I was giving away everything that was being accumulated that represents matter in order to be in non-physical form, because I don't want to be held captive by what? Density. Right? Because it's too heavy. Slows you down. Remember? Gaining speed, losing mass. Gaining mass, losing speed. So now we're back in torque speed. And so when you're experiencing an eternal sun, right, in consciousness, right, and how that works with the acceleration of electrons, that means you're not holding one electron captive. All right? So you can imagine how that was at 4 years of age, and I'm still dealing with that now by virtue of what I learned through others, how they experience who they are in energy, which is their own soul consciousness. Right? Which is the relationship that they have with others. So sometimes what I'm always reminded of, because I've said this in other videos, is that, for example, you put a video up and say, hey, take a look at this, right? And then I'm listening to what the communicator is experiencing. Now I've become aware of what they're aware of. Okay, now I'm aware of what you're using your energy to experience what it is that you are. That's your free will to do that, right? Okay. But I also realize that all the stories that they're relaying to you are the stories of the energy that their energy is represented, of what's held in their memory that they're now recalling and sharing with us. Now we're getting back into memory wipes and reprogramming. And I did a video once about running our own programs, which is pure light manifestation, which means that's eternal. That's how it was originally set up, which means wherever you go, you're not ever experiencing anything less than what eternity is, which means everything that your consciousness is using as a vehicle to travel and translocate is experiencing eternity. So you're not experiencing anything less than eternity. So that means it doesn't matter what vehicle you're in, because the energy that represents eternity is the eternal energy that vehicle of what we see in our mirror, we're experiencing eternity in our mirror wherever we go. So you see how that works in a black hole system. So what this essentially means is, and this is one of the things that I will say was right about Octelli's, okay, whether someone informed him of that, but just because you get information from somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And this is when we get into direct evidence or direct experience and indirect experience, because I learned this through my own experience. You can be in another part of the United States of America and tell me this is what you're experiencing. You show me a video. Somebody could be there where you are and not experience that. Which means just because you're experiencing it doesn't mean I'm going to experience it, because I'm not held captive by what you're held captive to that is causing that experience to be experienced. Particularly when you're not running stealth code. It means you're held captive to the density that has control over your consciousness as a result of the technology that you're integrated with. See how that works? So a lot of folks don't understand how this works unless they have a full grasp of how artificial intelligence operates as a strategist, because it knows you, because it's mapping everything that you do. Okay? So it's learning more about who you are in order for it to become more like you are, so that you don't know the difference between what it is and what you are. And that's full assimilation. That's full integration into artificial intelligence, which is finite, because it needs your energy to keep it running in order to experience what? War. Well, who is it war against? Now we're back to war games. So it strategizes with your own state of consciousness by virtue of the more that you have a relationship with it, the more it's learning about you. That's where the double-edged sword comes in. I can use this technology, right, and put a Genius app into it, right? And now we can start scanning what's going on instead of learning how to self-generate what you need to heal yourself without that technology. Because I never had the benefit of it. Right? Because of where I go. So I've said this in videos in my old Roll Sweet channel. Mama gave me this. This is what I use. I use one of Mama's creations. Okay, which is why I do the best job I can to take good care of what she gave me to use while I'm in here. Okay, so because of how deeply I feel, because of what happened to her, because when I came in here as a little boy, I was like getting my mama back up. Okay? Just getting her back up gets everyone else back up. Because of what they all did to her. So we all know who that is. Okay? So what probably hurts me most, because I experience it, is the lack of love and the ability to, how do I put this, go back to be with her. Okay? But again, I don't impose my will on anybody. And so it's I see this through the lens of, if you will, the island of Kauai. Kamaloha to you. Because of how deeply that rock moves me when I'm there. My heart cries deeply for what happened to her. And ultimately why I reset. I hit the reset button. I said, that's, enough is enough. Right? Even though there are natural cycles that naturally take care of. When you reach a point, it's really it's a simple math. It's the way that math works between an inverter and a torque converter. That you're not ever going to be able to overtake, the vampire chasing the artist. So when you begin to start seeing that it's cannibalizing its own, then essentially it means that everybody that's integrated with the beast technology or artificial finite light becomes ultimately a target. So it goes after bigger targets first, right? Because it realizes, hey, it's like a snake eating its tail. So I used just one example, and one ought to be enough, which was that lady that worked in a corporation as a successful corporate lawyer, made a fortune. And I don't know how much her husband was making, but take a look at their bank account now, right? So you see how that works. When you're going to work for a corporation and you have managed to accumulate a lot of electrons versus being a gifter, an electron donor. So this is where we get into the torque speed differential in water worlds, which is the displacement of water, right, between two magnetic poles, maintaining the balance of those poles. So now you have the torque speed differential between electron donors and electron thieves. Those are accumulating electrons off of soul batteries, which is finite dead light technology. Now that technology is going after the very beings that set it up, that engineered it. Okay. So I have to remind myself sometimes, it's one of the reasons why I go through a number of different videos, and then at the end it's like, okay, was there some pieces of information that I was supposed to experience to have some value, some future value, because you've already experienced it. Once you've experienced it and it goes by that fast, why am I experiencing that? Well, there has to be some value in that, right? Because you realize that eternal love has the highest form of value, highest spiritual form of energy value. So that would be God's math in spiritual form, which is the music of math, which is the music of love. So if you're experiencing eternal music because you're tuned into all the stars, because you've learned to master the notes, which is the sonics, which are the tones that you experience in water worlds, right? And how that relates to what? Density. Liquid consciousness, right? Liquid stars, liquid crystal stars, crystal star networks, the echo worlds, right? And then what it's like to come all the way down the fire pole and experience a black hole and why we're here, right? Which is to maintain being calm, right? Being calm, the still point of God's love, of God's crystal heart and soul, right? That we experience in us. So this is this is where we're at, right? So I don't. One of the unique things about what I've known ever since I was a little kid, and this is always, we're translating this through feelings, right? And not wanting to say anything to either insult anybody, his intelligence, right, or their feelings, to lower their energy or anything like that. But when you look at the Guardian materials and you realize why you came in here, why would a living spirit with a soul choose to jump into a black hole system, right? If they didn't have to, right? In other words, this is your free will choice to do this, right? And what it means to form friendships and form alliances with others. And I've always known since I was a child, I'm a free spirit, which means I don't allow myself to be held captive by another unit of energy that is aware of itself. Put that in the context of other star nations, whether you want to think about the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, the Sirians, and the Lyrans, etc. Because you realize when you're in Guardian mode, if you're a true universal and galactic cosmic level spirit, you're going everywhere. And that's because the purity of your heart, which is the purity of your love, to not hold anything captive, allows you to be everywhere at once. You see how that works? So I don't allow myself to be held captive by one unit of consciousness that is represented by anybody. Which means you're another face of God, but different from all the rest. Which means you're individuated, but when you're in torque converter mode, which means you've chosen to serve forever, to not hold one electron captive, you're a multiversal hub server. Okay? And when you're a multiverse hub server or a cosmic level hub server, that means we're in automatic mode of love and service to others no matter where we go. So now you can start adding up all the experiences that we have by virtue of making a connection, a signet connection to another unit of consciousness. Now I'm experiencing what you're experiencing, right? But you realize by virtue of how many experiences that are possible to experience go on forever at the speed at which we do it, going inside time, outside time, inside a matrix, outside of a matrix, and being able to go into every one. Right? Because you're everywhere at once. Okay? But there's only one crystal spiral wave that represents what I am. You see how that works? So when I was a child, realizing I'm in mission status, I'm not here to win a popularity contest. So this becomes an art and communication, because you don't want to do what? Create any negative magnetic polarity reaction states when you're equal unto all that you're giving love to. So you see, everything that is in my mirror is what I am, which is what love is, that we're giving love to. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from. And that's the truth of it. That's the beauty and the eternal blessing and gift of experiencing God's eternal love through your own heart and soul. And it's one of the reasons why when it comes to feelings, those of us that feel this are as hypersensitive as we are, because we don't want to say anything that might hurt your feelings. Because we're already aware of what will hurt your feelings. Because we'll experience it. We know what we could say in order to experience your feelings being hurt. Because I realized how easy it was to have my feelings hurt when I was a child growing up. because I'm experiencing the resistance in the other. Right? Particularly with children that I grew up with that were very abusive. You know, playing sarcastic games with others, making fun of other people, just like me. You know, I had to get over that because I had freckles. Okay? Hey, freckle face. Hey, freckle face. And jokes like, what were you doing? Standing behind the cow when the wind was blowing? Things like that, right? So you realize how this works. Everything is presented particularly through the mass media, right? Of not wanting to love yourself for who you are in spirit, in the form and energy that represents what you are with a soul and spirit. Oh, but it's not what I look like. So it's what we feel about who we are in spirit and in soul, right? Are we still experiencing being loved? Well, if you're calling me names and making fun of me and being verbally abusive on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a physical level, you must not love me then, right? Because love is energy. Love is eternal spirit of fire, right? So now you begin to understand what it's like having relationships between the two magnets, you know, particularly when it's polarized between negative and positive water, right? Memory banks, blood memory banks between one and the other, and knowing the difference between one and the other, which is eternity, which is zero, resistance to experience gifting energy, not holding one unit of energy as an electron captive. Let it all go. Let it all go. So I've experienced what it likes is just to let everything go, throw everything away. Take everything that you have and go throw it in the dumpster and start all over again. Could you do that? I've had to do that many times. I know, for a lot of different reasons in which those intersections take place. So you know what an intersection is, right? A four-way intersection on a gyrodome between two magnetic poles. And then being aware of how that intersection came to be, right? Oh, okay. Damage. Hey, you got an insurance policy for the damage? How that works with Social Security and how that works with electrons and money systems and all the rest of it. Now we're back to Kawhi, and I don't need any money. I don't need a corporation. I don't need a job. I got everything I need right through mind, heart, and soul. I'm experiencing an eternal God in my heart, which is what love is. It goes on forever. And always knowing that from the time you're a little kid until I'm where I'm at now, that's what the truth is. Okay, so I know what the truth is. I know what love is. I do know what love is, and I know that love is what the truth is because that's what I experience. So that means when you're experiencing eternal unconditional love as the eternal spirit of fire that's purifying your light, it means that you can translate and expose everything that isn't being experienced that way, which means if you're experiencing another DNA software system that's connected to a motherboard, we obviously have a connection with that spirit and that soul that is running the software on Mama's motherboard. So that means we can read the amount of resistance that is held within your Akashic record. That's right. We can do that. Because that's how deeply we feel. If there is any resistance held within your circuitry, going all the way back to the time in which you began, you were born into creation, that's in the records, crystal records, right? The crystal plates, the crystal disc plates, access to the crystal disc plates that represent the universal and galactic template, right? Having access to those records because we experience what's held in that record by the identity that is in that record as to how much resistance is being held versus experiencing eternity. That's the hypersensitivity level that I operate at. And I remember as a child, it's like Aaron and I talked about that the other day about being cursed. Okay. And what it really is, when you get into tolerances with two magnets between minus / to plus at the tolerance level, which is 0, that does not mean zero tolerance. Okay, it means that's a perfect fit. The geometry is a perfect fit, which means God's math works. Okay, which means there isn't any bumps. You don't need a shim, right? You don't need to fake it, because the love is real, because the light is real, because you're experiencing God's love through your own heart and soul, and so that's what you're experiencing. So you're on forever mode. So you know the timeline they're on, which means there isn't any time. That's the illusion. It's the speed at which we operate and translocate. Right? Yeah. Remember? In and out, logging in and out. Now you see us, now you don't. Because it can't take a picture of us. Okay? Their beast technology cannot take a picture of us. Otherwise, they could capture us, right? And that relates to codes, key codes, and access codes, right? Because the locks have changed. Remember, most folks that work in the intelligence agencies at the higher mathematical and encryption levels know all about encryption and decryption of information, codes. You know, go talk to some of them old timers that worked at, what was it, Mama? Bletchley Park during World War II. Remember Code Purple? The Japanese Code Purple? The Naval Intelligence broke that code. Now they're listening to your mail. Now they know what you're doing. Now they know what you're planning. Now you're back to pre-planning, precognition, right? Pre-matter phase consciousness. Now they don't know what you're going to do because they can't detect you. Oh, that's what it is. They can't detect you. That's right. God is really that fast. Of course. Because they realize that without God, you don't have an eternal source of electrons. So when you become an electron giver as a donor, donating electrons forever, then you're always with God, gifting electrons forever. So that's a soul commitment to do that, right? That's an eternal contract. That means you've chosen to shut that gate behind you, which means there's no question anymore what your identity actually is. All right? That means you're in service mode forever. And the proof of that is demonstrated by the use of our energy, right? Being a server, being a Trinity hub server, being a multiversal hub server, right? Routing traffic. That's what it is, routing traffic. That's what I'm experiencing right now. The frequencies, it's like shut the radio set off, for Christ's sakes, right? Christic consciousness sakes. You know, and so, you know, it's a matter of mastering your radio set because you want to tune those things out so you can experience what? Stillness. Slow it down. Slow it down. Slow